Everybody, how are you? My name is Ceci. Welcome. Hey, to all the students from Father McMurray that were there, it was so wonderful to have you. Rachel Notley is going to follow me right up, but I just want to say there's a few people in the crowd I want to recognize. Tanny Yao, MLA for Calgary. I'm from Calgary. From Fort McMurray, Wood Buffalo's in the crowd. Mayor Melissa Blake is in the crowd right there. Councillor Tyron Alt is also here, and Councillor Colleen Tatum. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. And welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us, whether you're here in person or connecting online. It's my pleasure. I'm Ceci to say hi to you all. I'm the Finance Minister and President of Treasury Board for the Alberta Government. I'll be the moderator for the Town Hall. Thank you all for taking the time to participate. We've gathered to talk about how our province should move forward through these difficult circumstances. Today, we're facing a once-in-a-generation challenge that will test us to the limits. As Finance Minister, I see the numbers every day, and there's no arguing with them. They tell a painful story about how Albertans are enduring the low price shock we're in. The slowdown has spread to many areas of our economy, and there is no one-size-fits-all answer. The energy sector has been incredibly good to Albertans, but it's during these times of falling prices that we feel the ripple effects in job losses, taxes, and prosperity. More of the same isn't good enough. We need to address the roots of Alberta's problems, and that's why we're here today. Our government will present Budget 2016 in a few weeks and make important decisions about the province's fiscal and economic future. So we've organized this town hall to share how government is dealing with the situation and to hear directly from Albertans. We want to hear what your concerns are when it comes to the challenges of growth, jobs, and development. These are tough problems with no easy answer. But government is determined to arrive at the solution in consultation with all Albertans. I'm joined today by Premier Rachel Notley, who will help answer some of your questions. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Premier Rachel Notley. Rachel.
Well, hi there. Hi, everybody. It's really a pleasure for me to be here in Fort McMurray with you, to be able to talk with you about some of the issues that are facing our province today, and also to hear from you about some of the things that you think we need to be doing as we move forward. You know, Alberta, as Joe has said, Alberta is facing a and economic challenges that result from the drop in the price of value of oil. And what values do we bring to the deliberative process as we navigate through these difficult times? So what are we going to do? Our government in general, we're going to focus on three things. First of all, we are going to help and support Alberta families as we move through these difficult times. In short, we will have their back, because that's what you need government to do. We are not going to pile on by making the situation worse, adding job loss to job loss, that kind of thing. The other thing that we are going to work very hard on over the next few years is to build a more resilient and diversified economy in a way that ensures that should we have this kind of price drop again after it recovers, that we're not as vulnerable as we clearly are right now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to manage the fiscal consequences of this drop in the price of oil. And that's not easy, but nonetheless, that's something that we're going to do. So when we talk about helping Alberta families, what are some of the things we have in mind? Well, some of you may have heard that twice now in the last 3 weeks or so, I've had the opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister. And every time I see him, I say, before you do anything else, we need to change EI rules, because it is not fair that the people of Alberta have to work longer and get less under EI when we're going through the kind of price shock that we have right now. So that's an example. We're also going to be working very hard to support families when it comes to training and retraining and job creation efforts. We're also, when it comes to diversifying the economy, we're going to try to diversify within the energy sector. Last month, we introduced a $500 million petroleum upgrading project that will encourage more upgrading and value-added industry here in Alberta. And I think there'll be a number of jobs and a great expansion to that part of the economy. And then we're also, of course, going to be working very, very hard on supporting businesses and job creators to build new ideas, new businesses, new types of economies, to build our economy. And one of the things we did there, of course, was that we introduced $2 billion of capital to support businesses that were otherwise struggling to get financial support to move their ideas forward. And then finally, we're going to manage the fiscal consequences. Now, as you would have heard Joe, our lovely finance minister, say not too long ago, the deficit this year is going to be much bigger than what we'd originally contemplated.
And that's because I said a hell of a lot bigger.
I think you did say a hell of a lot bigger. He said that. I was watching him say that. And as he said it, I was watching on TV. I'm like, you said what? But anyway, it's true. It's going to be a lot bigger. Yeah. And it's because the price of oil is much lower than originally projected, and it's likely going to last longer. And the question is, what do we do to deal with that? Well, we could cut up to $10 billion out of our spending. That would be roughly 20% cut in the government budget. Or we could impose $10 billion worth of taxes. Or we could manage our way through this carefully with a combination of prudence and keeping an eye on the numbers and slowly phasing out the deficit as the economy recovers. We're choosing that third option. We don't believe either of those other two options will help Albertans, will help our economy, will help our communities. Because as I said at the beginning, our view is that we need to have the back of Albertans, the back of Alberta families, the back of Alberta communities, in order to get through these tough times, because that's what Albertans do. We help each other out when times get tough. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion with you, answering some questions, and hearing from you. Some of your ideas about what we need to be going forward. I know things are tough in Fort McMurray. I know this is ground zero of what the change in the economy and the change in the price of oil, what it does to communities. And so we're here, and we're starting this conversation here because we need to hear from you. So thanks very much for coming out, and I look forward to the rest of our discussion.
All right, well, let's get it started then. Thank you very much, Premier. These are serious issues, and thank you for laying out that context in that way. But they're serious issues for all of Albertans. Fort McMurray residents probably, as you said, feel these a lot more than a lot of us. But for those of you who are just joining the broadcast now, welcome. We'll be taking your questions from the floor as well as online. Follow us and participate on Twitter using the AB Budget hashtag and on Premier Notley's Facebook page. Now let's move to our first question from, I think, is going to have that first question. Please stand up and introduce yourself. I think everybody knows you, Melissa, but do it anyway, and we'll be happy to take your question.
Thank you very much. And I would like to start, of course, Mayor Melissa for Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo, a gigantic region that contains 10 different communities and lots of needs. And I know that you've got the province of Alberta in your portfolio, which has even more communities and even more needs. I've certainly acknowledged Premier Notley for recognizing how much more poignant this change is in our community than perhaps other locations. And I think one of the most difficult things for us to do is crack the diversification nut. And we have spoken to you earlier today, and I'm grateful to have had that opportunity. We talked about things like taxation and continuing care on Willow Square. We talked about transportation, not only the crucial needs, but the opportunities as well. And one of the things that I said I saved the best for last was our Municipal Utility Corporation. And it's hard for even our citizens to know exactly what that is, but it's an evolution that we've been endeavoring to undertake. You've heard of places or companies like Epcor and Aquaterra, you've heard of MMAX and so on. And what I want to tell you about the Municipal Utility Corporation here in Wood Buffalo is it's not those, it's the energy utility company of the future. It is our greatest opportunity for introducing some of those economic diversification efforts and initiatives. And it's been advancing quite pleasurably through the government and trying to get that final authority. But essentially, it gives us a real opportunity to partner with our local business community, with our First Nations, our Métis partners, and bring real and meaningful change for generations to come in Wood Buffalo, all taking into account not only the necessity of the energy economy that we have now, but what the energy of the future might look like and how we can be participants well beyond the life of the oil sands here. So it leads me to my question, which is quite simply this. Having having heard my longer version of that earlier today, what might the government of Alberta be prepared to do for Wood Buffalo in terms of getting that municipal utility corporation?
Well, great. You want me to? I'd love to answer that. You know, it's so great to hear the discussion about diversification of our economy, because for far too long we've been too narrowly focused on a revenue stream that comes from the energy sector alone. Not that it's not a great, important sector to continue to support and value, but diversification is necessary if we want to have a broader range of revenues, and I certainly do, on behalf of all Albertans, want that. The province is happy to support and encourage, and in the very few next weeks, I think, see your utility corporation stand up on its own and begin to take care of what we used to call waste products, but utilize them in ways that make us all more sustainable in the future, because we can't continue to bury stuff and leave it. We can't continue to walk away from our responsibilities of making sure that we don't leave something that's a problem for future generations. So the utility corporation, I'm happy to hear about. I think it'll be stood up, and the government of Alberta is glad to support that and make that happen as quickly as possible. Thank you. All right, so let's go to the next question. And thank you for the rest of those who are joining us online. I'm the Finance Minister, Joe Ceci. I'm here with Premier Rachel Notley, taking questions from you live via Twitter and the Premier's Facebook page using the hashtag #ABBudget. Now let's take a question submitted to us through Facebook. And the question is?
We have a question from Greg from Fairview, who wants to know how we will promote Energy East to sell our oil.
Well, that is a very, very good question, and an exceptionally timely question, and one that I'm spending a great deal of time on. The first thing the first sort of plank of our efforts to promote Energy East, and quite frankly, pipelines going west as well, because it doesn't just need to be east. There's 3 possible pipelines, and we just need one of them. But anyway, well, let's talk about Energy East, because that's the one that's been in the news the most. So the first thing that we decided we needed to do as a government was to change the conversation that we were having with Canadians across this country about the pipeline, about what it meant, about the product that was coming down that pipeline, and what it meant to Canadians who, quite honestly, had concerns, environmental concerns, and those issues had been torqued in a way that had distorted the conversation so that we couldn't have a reasonable conversation on the merits of the issue. And so one of the key pieces that had its own merits on its own, but which also very nicely supports the Energy East campaign, is the province's climate leadership plan that was announced last fall. And I can tell you, I've been traveling around the country, and what I've been able to do is go and talk to people who have historically been unwilling to listen to arguments for why we need to get our product to Tidewater, who were now happy to listen to those arguments. So I would talk to them. I was in downtown Toronto at an event that was hosted by a bunch of downtown Toronto environmentalists. And I went in there and I talked to them about our climate leadership plan, but then I talked to them about how our country as a whole has an economy that is still very much connected to and reliant upon the extraction and shipping of non-renewable resources, and that it is possible to be a progressive, clean, forward-looking, non-renewable energy-producing jurisdiction, one whose product is received happily in markets across the world. And that it was fundamental to not only the Alberta economy, but to the Canadian economy, that we get our product to market. And the upside to that was when I finished talking, that room of about 500 people gave me a standing ovation. And I don't think that that would have happened before. So I think we are slowly turning the page on this issue. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is moving. Now, meantime, we're going to continue to work around the country to talk to people about why that pipeline needs to get through. And we are going to take every opportunity to make the case. And in the meantime, we will also be working with the federal government and our provincial counterparts to find ways to make this move faster. Yesterday, I was very pleased. I was at the First Minister's Conference on climate change and the economy, and I was very proud to be able to convince my colleagues to amend the final communique so that it said that all premiers agreed on the urgency of getting our product to Tidewater and the need to do it in a timely and predictable way. And it was very important to me that I got the Prime Minister, the Premier of Quebec, and the Premier of BC all agreed to that statement. So I think we're making progress. We will not stop until we get it done. We understand that it makes no sense to leave a third of the cost of the barrel, or the third of the price of a barrel of oil on the table, which is what we're doing right now by not having access. So it continues to be a priority for me, a priority for my Minister of Energy, a priority for my Minister of the Environment, priority for our Finance Minister. And so you can count that we will work hard to get this done. And it's been 10 years. It hasn't happened yet, so we're going to take a new strategy, try a new strategy to build relationships across the country rather than yelling at people, and to negotiate rather than throwing stones, and to see if we can have more success that way. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Thanks very much. It's not an easy thing to get a whole room full of premiers and the Prime Minister to talk together.
No ego in that room at all. None.
All right. I would like to have been there. I'm sure we all would have liked to have been a fly on the wall there. Our next question, though, comes to us through Twitter, I think, using the hashtag #ABBudget. And it is...
We have a Twitter question from Calgary. People are losing their jobs, and they're wondering why the government itself isn't making cutbacks.
Well, that's an often asked question. I can tell you that we are making cutbacks, though. We have shown restraint in hiring. We've shown restraint in freezing my salary and yours and political staff, and as well as the management and opted out. Over 7,000 public servants' staff are frozen, and their grid movement is also frozen. Where we haven't done that, of course, is in the negotiated settlements we've achieved with the unions that deliver services not only to the government of Alberta, but to the hospitals, the schools, and other places. And we won't open and, destroy those contracts because they're contracts, and that's the way Canadians and everybody should operate, is upholding contracts until they come open for renegotiation, and then there is a negotiated settlement that takes place at a bargaining table. That's where that's going to take place. So we're working to constrain expenditures in that area. And we're doing a number of other things that you'll see rolled out in Budget 2016 that will show that we're additionally restraining the amount of money that goes into government services. Though we are the most cost-effective, one of the most cost-effective public services in the entire country. People don't think we are, but we are. And I'll continue to say it because it's true. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could just add to that as well. I mean, I know a lot of people, it's very hard when you're worried about your job, or your spouse has lost their job, or your child has lost their job, or someone in your family's lost your job. It's very hard not to be worried. And with worry comes fear and frustration. And so it's not an uncommon sentiment for people to say, why do those people still have their job when I don't have mine? But I think it's really important to understand that the reason the economy is slowing down, the reason jobs are in jeopardy, is because the price of oil has come down. And let me be very clear, we are not going to restore the price of oil by laying off teachers, by laying off nurses, by undercutting our health care, and by undercutting our education.
All right. Yes. Why don't we get on to the next question, back to the live audience, and take a question from the floor. Who's got that one? Oh, right behind us.
Sorry, I have a quick question. I believe that the Liberal government said they would invest $700 million towards the Alberta. I have a few concerns about that. Is that, so our parents mainly grew up under Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, and if they just finally finished paying off for his Liberal deficit, how will $700 million dollars be affecting all the kids into the audience who will probably grow up in Alberta and have an Alberta oil sands-based job? How will we be strangleholded by this $700 million deficit?
Well, I think the first thing to remember, I think I'm just going to do this like this. This is a interesting setup we have here. But anyway, first of all, that 700 million that was first announced is actually it's a re-announcement essentially of what was announced under the Harper government about 3 years ago, and it just hadn't been rolled out yet. So that's the first thing. So it's a continuation of that. It is true, though, that both the Liberal federal government and our government have made a decision that to deal with the economy, the economic slowdown, that one of the things we need to do to kickstart economic development, to give people jobs where other jobs don't exist, is to invest in capital and infrastructure investment. And so both the federal government has made a commitment to do that, and frankly, we'll end up with much more than that 750 million. I suspect over the course of the next 2 years, we'll probably see that number at least double. And indeed, our government has made a commitment to do that as well. And yes, that does create a deficit over a short period of time. But one of the things that I think some folks who've been around since the last time we had an economic slowdown know is that when you stop spending money on infrastructure, you create another deficit. You create a deficit in highways, you create a deficit in hospitals, you create a deficit in schools, you create a deficit in the very capital infrastructure that would support economic growth. And so it's a question of investing in the future. And our view, our government actually sought out advice from the former governor of the Bank of Canada, David Dodge, to say, what do we do to kickstart economic development and economic stimulation during this slowdown? And how do we deal with it with respect to our fiscal situation? And in Alberta, even though we don't have anywhere nearly as much money in the pot from all the oil and gas that we've had, given the great prices that we had many, many years ago, we don't have anywhere nearly as much as we should, but what we do have is essentially no debt right now. And so we have the capacity to borrow money. Interest rates are at an all-time low. And so it is a good investment to invest in infrastructure. And so that's what David Dodge told us to do when we sought out his advice. That is essentially the same thing that the Liberal government is doing. And there's a question of you need to be prudent. You need to borrow within what you can afford to do, and you need to have a plan to get rid of that deficit that is realistic and reasonable. But at the same time, when the economy slows down, it's our view that the role of government is to reach out to the citizens and find other ways to support communities, support families, and to support job creation. So that's what we're going to try and do. And I really thank you for your questions. Very thoughtful.
It's a great question. Thank you very much for it. And please keep them coming both here in person and online using the hashtag #ABBudget. We'll take another question now from Twitter. And the question is?
Our next question from Twitter is about diversification and what we will do to diversify the economy.
What? Me? You?
You can start and I can follow up.
Okay. That's often how we work at the legislature. Diversification is critical. I think I started it with Mayor Blake over here when I said that we need to broaden our interests beyond the oil and energy sector. We have tremendous sectors in tourism that are going really strong right now because of the low dollar with regards to the United States. So we're getting a lot of visitors. Forestry is really important for us, agribusiness and agriculture. Diversifying into those areas helps us out a lot as a province and keeps the revenue coming in. And of course keeps many, many more people employed over the short term. Diversification, the Premier also mentioned that there's a significant capital expenditure happening that's going to put Albertans back to work, keep them working in this downturn, and that's critical too. How about you now?
All right. Okay. Well, I mean, some of the other things that we're working on, of course, as Joe mentioned, is this idea of making, or no, actually you mentioned, I mentioned it. Anyway, making capital for financing available to business, small businesses, venture capital businesses, small, medium-sized enterprises who otherwise struggle to get financing. And so, as I've said, we've made $2 billion of capital available to those people, those job creators, to support the innovation that they want to move forward on. And to be clear, it's not one of those things where Joe and I just go, oh, that sounds a good idea, and we write a check. It's being managed by the bankers at ATB and at the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, people who evaluate the strength of the business ideas, evaluate the financial capacity of the company, and so they engage in good, solid business practice, but we've just given them more to work with. Another thing that, of course, is, I think, quite critical, and we had a conversation with the mayor and some of the folks at council about how our climate change leadership plan actually supports a lot of diversification work that is going on, because we'll be incenting investment in technological innovation in and within the non-renewable sector quite substantially, such that we can take what is already a benefit in Alberta, in that we have some of the most innovative work going on within our oil and gas sector, and we'll build on that so that that itself can be something that exports to other energy producing jurisdictions. But then through that as well, we are also through our plan going to be incenting non-renewable or renewable energy development and technology and efficiency work. And so that too will create opportunities for businesses in the renewable energy sector. As already mentioned, of course, we've got the capital plan investment, so that's a key piece. And of course, we will be continuing to focus our work in post-secondary education. As many of you may know, we froze tuition last year, and we've introduced a number of programs that make student financing more accessible so that people can go back to school and retrain in order to make themselves more marketable in an evolving economy. So those are a few of the ideas that we're working on, and there will be more.
Yeah. All right. We have another question from Facebook.
We have a question from Chestermere about what our plans are for the growing student population but lack of teachers in schools.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as we, in the last election campaign, I'm going back now, it seems like 10 years to me, actually, but I guess it was only 8 months. There was already a conversation that was had around Alberta about how we deal with the impending fiscal challenges that we knew the province was going to be facing. And at that time, we said that we would not take money away from our schools. And the budget that was proposed by the previous government that they went into the last election with amounted to not hiring roughly 1,200 teachers to accommodate the enrollment growth that was going on throughout the K-12 sector in Alberta. So one of the first things that we did when we got elected was we brought in legislation to say, no, we're restoring that funding. We were not going to have our class sizes grow. We weren't going to have tens of thousands of kids start school in September without hiring the teachers that needed to go with them. So we kept that commitment, and we will continue to keep that commitment. We're going to manage our growth very carefully, but we are going to fund enrollment growth. And of course, we're continuing as well our investment in capital with respect to schooling, the actual schools, the bricks and mortar. But we know that education is fundamentally important to the future of our economy, to the strength of our communities, not just economically, but socially as well. And so that is not an area that we're going to pull back on. And we're going to be careful, we're going to be prudent, but you're not going to see any kind of dramatic reduction in services there of any type.
That's great. That was a lot of fun at Father McMurray today, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was amazing.
Here's some of the students here. The trappers. We really enjoyed going to the science classes and seeing the mannequin. What was it, Gertie? I think that mannequin was. Yeah, it was a tremendous tour of the school. Thank you very much, Madam Premier, or Rachel. For those of you who are just joining us now, welcome to the pre-budget virtual town hall, hosted by myself, Finance Minister Ceci, and the Honorable Premier Rachel Notley. Let's take another question from the floor here in Fort McMurray. And where are we? Yes, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Lucy. I notice I'm one of the few women in her 30s here today. Despite that Fort McMurray is a very young city with the highest birth rates in Alberta, yet I understand families and supporting them is very, very important, despite downturns in oil, in economy, or in good times. What I want to get to is that decreasing physician spending has been discussed, and I know that would really help with decreasing spending in healthcare. yet some alternatives to physician spending would probably to look at other care providers. And I'm just curious what Alberta Health has been considering when it comes to funding nurse practitioners, midwives, and other primary caregivers.
It's a very good question, and thank you. So let's talk about healthcare overall. As you know, I mean, healthcare is fundamental to our government and historically our party, and we understand how important it is to all Albertans. You need to have that healthcare, to have it available for you when you need it. And you need to know that it's always going to be there for you when you need it. At the same time, over the last 10 years or so, our healthcare budget in Alberta has been rising on average about 6% a year. And our healthcare budget takes up over 40% of our provincial budget. So in order to hold spending, what that means is that we need to slowly ratchet down that rate of increase. And so we're working rigorously on that with AHS to do that in a targeted way. One of the groups that the minister will be working with is the physicians, and I won't get really into that because I don't like to, you know, as I've said before, I'm not going to bargain in public, and that's not my plan here. But we are working with the physicians. But in addition to that, you're absolutely right that what we need to do in Alberta is make sure that the right people are caring for the right patients in the right way at the right time, and that means vastly improving the ability to work with nurse practitioners. And midwives are a perfect example as well. We understand that obstetric service is difficult to access in many communities. And so the more midwifery services that we can provide, the better. And the Minister of Health is working on that issue right now. And there are other care providers as well. The previous government deserves some credit in terms of the degree to which they expanded the ability of pharmacists, for instance, to write prescriptions. That you know started to slow down the need for people to go to see their doctor just to get a prescription for something they knew full well that they had, and they didn't need to go to their doctor to get the prescription written. It just created extra trips to the doctor. And in the meantime, we have to look at ways to think about how doctors provide services. We have the highest amount of fee-for-service delivery in the country with doctors. And there are better models in order to provide a wider scope of care, more fulsome care, in a way that doesn't drive the prices up at the 6% a year that we've been seeing. So there's a lot of creative options being considered, but they're all focused on making sure people still get access to care, but they're getting care from the right person. Because I think a lot of people here can imagine that when they've gone to see their doctor, there are lots of times that a nurse practitioner could easily have provided the assistance they needed. And so it's a perfect example of how we need to restructure the way healthcare is delivered in Alberta in order to get the best healthcare in the right time. So that's some of the work. The other thing that we'll be doing as well is that, and this is a cost increase on one side, but in the long term it will reduce costs, is to ensure that we build more long-term care and more long-term care type services. So our government is moving ahead with the Willow Creek project here in Fort McMurray, and we made that decision soon after we were elected, and so that's a done deal. But in addition, we need more beds across the province because we have too many people sitting in hospitals that really ought not to be there, because we don't have the right places for them. And so we know we need to do a better job on that. So lots of big issue. I could probably talk for an hour just on healthcare, quite frankly. So I'll stop because I'm burning out the clock.
No, I think the kind
thank you for that question.
Thanks, Lucy. I think the kind of thing you were trying to share was what the health minister often says, the right care by the right person at the right time. And we're committed to doing that. It's going to take some time to get there, but I'm really confident in our health minister, and she is working closely now with physicians on their agreement with the government of Alberta. So next steps are going to be taken soon. Joelle, do you have another person from the audience? Is that? Yes, you do. Thank you. Another live question from the floor. Sir.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name's Neil Ferguson. I work for Jacobs Contracting, presently at the Suncor site. And my question is, what is the NDP government prepared to do to help secure union labor in the future?
Just generally, or
just in general, if you have some specific steps that will.
Well, we're looking right now. We've certainly. I mean, I can't announce this as a specific thing because we haven't made a final decision. But certainly, for instance, with the capital investment that we'll be making in the infrastructure investment that we'll be making, we're looking at ways to ensure that we encourage bidders to be presenting with unionized workforces there. As well, there will be a point at which we'll be reviewing the labor code in the province of Alberta to bring it into alignment with the rest of the country. It's long overdue, and so that's something that I think just ensures greater fairness. Still allows for people to choose whether they want to be in a union or not in a union, but there needs to be a sort of transparent and democratic process through which that can happen. And so, so those are some of the things that we're working on. And oh, right. And then another thing that we are thinking about doing in terms of the trades is trying to find ways to encourage more apprenticeship opportunities so that people who are sort of part way through their apprenticeship process can get the experience they need to get that ticket. So that's not a union thing specifically, but it obviously impacts a lot of unionized workers. So those are some of the issues that we're working on right now.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Joelle, I think we've got another question from over there.
So we have a series of questions on different road building, but mostly on infrastructure. So questions about Highway 63 and other infrastructure programs across the province.
Well, other infrastructure, oh, here, okay. When will 63 be repaved? And when will Highway 40 from be a priority? I wish Minister Mason was here from Transportation to answer these questions. He probably knows the answer. Anybody know the answer to these?
Well, does anyone know? So we are in the process of deliberating on the details with respect to the capital plan. As many of you will know, we added $4 billion to our 5-year capital plan on the advice, as I said before, of former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge. So there's a lot of sort of individualized projects that we're now in the process of going through. I was in Grand Prairie just on Monday, I think, and there was quite a bit of talk about Highway 40 and the need to pave it and also have more turnouts on it because of the safety issues, pull-out lanes because of the safety issues. And I know that our Minister of Transportation is working on all of this. He's already, of course, committed that Highway 63 will be completed fully and the twinning will be completed fully, but I know he's also working on a number of other projects. So I will tell you I don't have the exact list in front of me, nor have we signed off on the final list. So I can't say.
But early April, the final list will come out with the budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And everybody will be able to see it then. And we'll have a sunshine list in addition, so they can see all the projects that have been identified in the province as well. And we have another question on the slides, I think.
Question is from Jerry in Edmonton, who wants to you to explain why our approach to a budget crisis is better than the previous government's approach.
That sounds like a very friendly question. Well, as I say, there's different ways in which you can deal with a fiscal crisis. And as Minister Ceci has already identified, we know that we have a fiscal problem in Alberta, and people are worried about it. Our questioner over there is worried about long-term deficits and debt control, and those are important issues, and we don't take those lightly. The issue for us, though, is that, I think some of the people, someone mentioned that there aren't a lot of people in here under 30. It seems to me there actually are quite a bit. But some people here will remember, the 90s. And in my view, when you go into an economic downturn, when people are losing their jobs, when communities are suffering, when families are stressed, you don't pile on to that, as I said before, by firing teachers and nurses, but also by, closing down, family support centers, by pulling back on those community supports that provide assistance to families in crisis, by closing libraries. I mean, these are not the things that you do. You build your community. You don't pull back from your community. So we understand, of course, that over time, we have to deal with the way in which we balance the budget. And as I've said, we're going to do two things. We are going to be very prudent. The rate of increases that you will see in our budget will actually be lower than what we had previously projected. You will see that we are already making targeted reductions in areas that we don't believe will hurt communities or families or economic development. And you'll see we have a fairly ambitious plan with respect to the agency's boards and commissions throughout the province of Alberta. So we are going to be rationalizing government services, but it's got to be done always with those values in mind, that you support each other when times are tough, and that you don't make the situation worse by making sort of thoughtless across-the-board cuts. And so that's the way we're going to move forward on this, because we do believe we will come through this. We do know we will get through this. And we know Alberta continues to be an exceptionally innovative province with an exceptionally talented population. We have the youngest, best educated, most diverse population in the country. And I know that we will get through this. So we just have to support each other to do it. And that's the approach that our government's going to take to getting through this budget time.
All right. Well, thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. I want to thank everyone for those thoughtful questions and comments. Our question and answer time has come to an end, unfortunately. Premier Rachel, I'd like to invite you, do you want to share any concluding thoughts with us? Or?
Well, again, as I say, I'm just so pleased to be up here in Fort McMurray today. I'm looking forward to, we've had good meetings already today. We'll be having more after this. As I say, Fort McMurray has and does contribute massively to the prosperity of our province. We know it, and we also know that times are very, very tough here right now, and that it's our job to reach out and work as closely as we can with leaders in your communities to come up with ways to help you through this, and that's what our focus will be. With the industry, I haven't had a chance to even really talk yet at all about the royalty review, but I think you all understand that the conclusion of our royalty review is the product of work with leaders in industry to ensure that we were able to support industry in these difficult times and to incent improvements while at the same time providing stability for investors. So we understand the importance of that relationship and the importance of the industry and the importance of your community. And we look forward to being able to continue these kinds of discussions over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Premier. Thanks to everyone who joined us here in Fort McMurray and across Alberta. That's all the time we have today, but the conversation is far from over. I invite you to visit www.budget.ab.ca to submit your ideas and comments. We'll be taking your Budget 2016 submissions until 4:30 p.m. on March 11th. And I encourage all Albertans to continue to engage with us through Twitter, Facebook, Google, and your Alberta using the hashtag ABBudget. It's been my pleasure to host you today, and I want to thank you again for your time and participation, your great questions. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to the meeting I'm going to be having with some of the community and social agencies just after this. And so I don't want to I want to hear what they have to say. Certainly, there's no question that Fort McMurray really is a center of, in many ways, a real optimistic bunch of folks. There's a lot of innovation going on here, a lot of sort of finding the positive in a negative situation that I'm hearing from the leadership folks who I've had a chance to meet with, so that's encouraging. But at the same time, I know that there's been major job loss, and that people are seeing the values of their homes go down, and there's a great deal of concern and worry. So I suspect I'll probably get a bit of a better feel for that when we have some of our meetings after this. But again, as I say, it's a difficult time. We're here to learn about the specific issues and figure out how we might be able to help in a strategic and effective way. Well, we talked about a number of things. We talked about the Municipal Utilities Corporation, which I have to say was, as she said, she saved the best for last, because it really is very exciting. Some of the stuff that they're talking about there is just brilliant, and the kind of story that we need to tell more about Fort McMurray, quite frankly, in as many places as we can, because it's just so counter to what people think about, yet it's so leading on progressive, renewable environmental policies. But that being said, so we talked about that. We talked about whether I might be able to bring some premiers up here from other parts of the country to educate them a little bit about Fort McMurray in a more positive way as we work on our pipeline efforts, and so I'm going to be trying to make that happen. We talked, of course, about the position of the municipality with respect to linear assessment and where that's going. And as you know, that issue's being considered right now by our municipal affairs minister, and will likely be introducing some legislation in the spring for consultation over the course of this summer, and then resolution in the fall. And I'm trying to think what the other issues were. She gave me a great list of items. I can't remember what the other ones were. Then we talked about transportation, of course, as well. So it was a really useful conversation with everybody.
Premier, I know diversifying the economy is a big topic for the budget and the short-term future, but outside the oil industry, what exactly is there for Fort McMurray to support?
Well, I think that Fort McMurray is a beautiful town. I frankly think that there's tourism opportunities. There's some renewable energy opportunities. You've got a post-secondary institution here, and I think there's a lot more to be done there. The fact of the matter is even with the price of oil down, although exploration and new projects are slowing down, you definitely still, most of your places are still operating, and they will for a very long time. So it's a question of what other things can we do, and how can the community support each other in terms of small business and local business activity, and whether there's stuff that we can do to assist with that too. But it's there's no question. Fort McMurray has been very much defined by, and particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, by the price of oil, maybe there's benefit to not growing as fast as you were, and so we're going to at least try to work with that and see if we can look at some infrastructure projects that would get Fort McMurray positioned to be ahead of the game when and if the next push comes for development.
In terms of manufacturing renewable technology, is Alberta really in a position to even take that on, considering we're nowhere near any major American hubs and we have no access to ports?
Well, I think, there's frankly an internal market. There's a huge internal market for renewable energy in Alberta. We use a heck of a lot of energy in Alberta, even with the drop in the price of oil. And that's one of the things that our climate change leadership plan is going to do, is it's going to incent the market for that renewable energy. And I've been meeting with so many fabulous innovators and business leaders around different ideas, whether they're talking about technology focused on reducing methane production from gas extraction, or whether you're talking about technology around enhancing the efficiency of solar or wind, or whether you're talking about cogeneration, or whether you're talking about some of the exciting things that the Municipal Utilities Corporation is interested in doing. There are a lot of opportunities, and I think that with our climate change leadership plan, there's a lot of opportunities for people to access some support to support the startup of some of that work in those industries.
Premier, you've been in power for almost 3/4 of a year now, maybe a bit more now. Why did it take so long to get up here?
Well, I've actually had several ministers come up here since we've been elected, and quite frankly, it's been a function of just the job. We're taking over a government that's 44 years old, and we had to get ourselves, we were a caucus of 4, with 4 of us that were used to being in the legislature, and then we went to a caucus of 54. And we needed to get a handle on the reins of government. We'll be introducing a budget in about in a few weeks, and which will mean that our government will have introduced 2 budgets in under 12 months. So we've been very busy, and when you've been in power for a really long time and you can delegate things to everybody and not worry about whether it's what you want to have happen, then you can go out and do lots of visiting. But when you're trying to take for a government which has been working with one party for 44 years and get it onto the path that you're interested in seeing it takes a little bit more engagement at that level. So any electricity that I'll be able to spend more time going around and traveling through other parts of Alberta.
I just wanted to ask if you could elaborate on the comments of your energy minister, who said they won't be buying any electricity from BC unless we can get our resources through that province.
Well, I think the issue really is this. I mean, there is a desire or some thinking on the part of BC that they could. Well, first of all, they want, I think, federal funding, which, to be clear, if they get federal funding, that's a little bit less in the pot for us. So it needs to be federal funding for something that is valuable to us. And they're looking at wanting to build electricity infrastructure, mostly likely from Site C into Fort McMurray to help power the oil sands. Electricity infrastructure, upgraded versions.
Please put through the first caller.
Benefits of
that need exchange. But there's no question that it may well be that BC would see the opportunity to sell the hydroelectricity into Alberta as an economic benefit. And it's an economic benefit that would be attached to our need to more effectively transport our product to Tidewater. So it may well be that there's a mutually beneficial relationship that can be established there. But that's very high level, and I need it to stay high level because really that's the kind of thing that you need to really have some time to dig into and have a respectful conversation with your colleagues and understand where they're coming from. So it's a possibility, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that and a lot of conversations and positions to be heard, because we haven't had an opportunity to have a really detailed discussion with the Premier of BC or her staff on it. But although we are in the process of arranging opportunities for more meetings very soon.
I understand that she raised this issue yesterday at the conference in Vancouver, and I'm wondering what was the message that you gave to her regarding whether Alberta is interested in purchasing power from British Columbia?
Well, actually, quite honestly, the message that I gave not only to the Premier, to all the Premiers, which was what precipitated, I think, the inclusion of the issue around the urgency of pipeline construction in the final communique, was that the environmental initiatives that we were all articulating were really important for us to move forward on, that the climate change initiatives that we all want to move forward on in different ways across the country, including the hydro BC wants to do, that work that the Premier of BC wants to do, that all requires a little bit of cash. That requires prosperity. That requires investment. And the fact of the matter is that when we're looking at how we attract investment, not just to Alberta, but to Canada, investors from outside of the country look at whether we have an integrated energy export system that allows us to maximize the profits for our product. And right now, we're leaving about a third of the profit on the table because we can't diversify our customer base. And that is silly. And it's not just, it's just, we are a country that should be able to get it together better than we have on this issue. So that was the position that I took with everybody, and then obviously it had those sort of implications with respect to the direct potential relationship between BC and Alberta with respect to hydroelectricity.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from the line of Rick Bell with the Sun. Your line is now open.
Good afternoon, Premier. I realize, I listened to your town hall, I realized you're not going, I'm going to have to do another way of asking a question. I realize you're not going into existing labor deals that are already inked. And I realize you're not going to bargain in public.
Excellent.
But is your government even considering a hiring freeze, which would not be a contract negotiation, or a wage freeze, a general wage freeze as contracts expires? So I'm not talking about teachers in particular, whatever. So is your government even considering, is that even on the table, hiring freeze, and as contracts expire, a general wage freeze for all government employees?
We have not brought in yet a hiring freeze, although we are looking at hiring restraint, because of course you have people that retire, right? So if you just had a hiring freeze, you have maybe 10% of your labor force will retire in any given year. I mean, I don't exactly know what the level is, but I'm just saying that hypothetically. And so to say that we would freeze all hiring as a whole would not take into account the degree to which some of those people need to be replaced, like for instance, if they're an operating room nurse or something like that. But we are looking at different measures of hiring restraint, absolutely, and we'll have more to say on that in the budget. With respect to the freeze, what happens now when a collective agreement expires, the last salary that was in play continues until such time as a new agreement is negotiated. So in effect, I mean, they don't continue to get increases without them being negotiated once the term of the collective agreement has expired. They simply continue to be paid at the rate that they were last paid at the end of the collective agreement. So in effect, you're not seeing wages go up outside of, or once the agreement's expired. And as you rightly identified, our position with respect to how those new agreements should be negotiated is something that we will leave to the bargaining table.
And just a supplementary, at the town hall you mentioned that operating budget increases are going to be lower in this budget, the 2016 budget, than previously projected. Mm-hmm. So I guess I gather from that we can gather from that there are going to be operating budget increases. That is to say that the operating budget for 2016 will be at least slightly bigger than the operating budget of 2015, the current budget.
What I was referring to there actually was simply that the expenses in 2015, 2016 are not as high as articulated in the 15-16 budget, that we've been able to make in-year savings to deal somewhat with the lower expected revenue in 15-16. That's what I was referring to. And in terms of your other question, you should wait and see for when we bring in the budget.
We'll take one last question from the phone. Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from the line of Darcy Henton with the Calgary Herald. Your line is now open.
Hi, Premier. Just following up on Chris Barco's question. Do you see the electricity for pipelines as a possible solution to this deadlock?
Well, as I've said, I mean, it's what it does is it lays an interesting framework out for discussion. You know, there is of course value to simply enhancing our access to renewable energy straight up. I mean, and I don't want anyone to think that we don't understand that that's important. But at the same time, in Alberta, we do need to really focus our efforts on investing in our own energy security and our own renewable energy security. So we wouldn't want to find ourselves in a position where we're held captive to another jurisdiction for renewable energy. Excuse me. I need some water. Sorry. Been Okay, let's try that again. Well, it may work. Anyway, so it continues to be something that we'll work on as a potential starting point for additional discussions that we were already planning on having. Sorry. I'm not sure.
Okay, we're going to wrap up there.
Sorry,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
I've been fighting this cold all week. All right. Thank you very much.